right? And I said, you don't tell me what to do. I tell you what to do. And he was like, I own the company. I was like, oh, okay. I get it. Hey, what's going on? I'm Kris. I'm eating honey wheat twists, pretzels. I've been drinking. This is my third Frederick the Great video tonight. What? Why am I all over here? What the shart is happening? This is where I should be. Yeah. I apologize. Alright, look, Papa's been drinking. I've been drinkskin. I'll be honest. The honey wheat, it's throwing me off. It's a pretzel. Shouldn't be sweet. Should have some salt. And then the pretzel taste, which I don't know what the hell that means. But whatever. Hey Panda, I'm looking right here where this thing is right here, where I'm moving this thing, the mouse. There you go. This is another Frederick the Great. Battle of outbreak of the 7 Years' War. You got any 7 Years' War videos that I should be aware of? I know I got some Genghis Khan videos from you, or Genghis Khan, or Genghis Khan. I've been drinking, baby. I don't know what you want from me, man. I don't speak English when I'm drinkskin, right? I don't think so. So I'm gonna eat some of these, and we're gonna watch this video, and we're gonna like it. And I just had the urge to pee, but I'm not going to, because I've been drinking too much. So let's get on with the video. I apologize.
It was a cold and misty early afternoon in December 1745. Light snow fell down on the Prussian army, slowly approaching the small village of Kesselsdorf. They had been chasing their adversaries.
Sorry, I just want to... For a split second, I freaked out and thought that I had went too far. Sorry.
With great reluctance, echoed by their commander, Frederick the Great's mentor, Prince Leopold I, also known as the Old Dessauer. Inside the town, Saxon Field Marshal Frederick Augustus, Count Butowski, was relatively confident awaiting the impending battle. Kesselsdorf was well fortified. His Saxons outnumbered the Prussians, and he knew an even larger army was approaching to reinforce him. Then, the Old Dessauer ordered his army forward in a ferocious frontal charge against the fortified positions, despite facing superior numbers. After the Battle of Sohr, Frederick made sure his army remained on the battlefield for a few days to show the world the Prussians were in
Sorry, I hit my mouse.
fact victorious. Considering his army was outnumbered nearly 2-1, propaganda could quickly turn that around. All the while, Frederick received news of his generals scoring victories against irregulars behind front lines deep in Prussian territory. He also received optimistic dispatches from his envoy negotiating peace with the English. Admittedly, things were looking pretty good for the Prussians, and the king was certain peace was imminent. But it was wishful thinking. Maria Theresa was dead set on the destruction of Prussia and the king personally. Frederick's personal account in the history of my own times reveals the fortitude of the empress degenerated sometimes into obstinacy.
I apologize. Panda, I asked you. I don't even know if I actually asked you. Do you have anything on the 7 Years' War? Because now I'm questioning if I even asked you. Have I been drinking too much? Yeah, probably. Question. though this is why I'm pausing. In all the leaders of all the countries, and I understand Prussia no longer exists, Frederick the Great, sorry, is he viewed as a good military mind or as a good... Would he be... Yeah, he would be the leader of the country. Kind of like a military dictatorship kind of thing. Was he a good military guy, or was he just a good leader? Because I know he's very untrustworthy, but he seems to have done a good job luring I forgot the name, Sea of Lorraine. I apologize. I know he lured him in and beat him on 2 battles. And episode 4 and episode 3, you can see those. Seems very untrustworthy. But I'm just curious as to... I mean, look, you take the Great Frederick the Great title, but I'm just curious as to where he would be in terms of. And I understand. Somebody pointed out today, it's tough to rank people. I get it. I know. It's just a stupid question I'm asking. If there is no answer, there is no answer. I'm not forcing it.
She was a woman, intoxicated at having recovered the imperial dignity for her descendant. Occupied solely by the smiling prospects of futurity, she thought her grandeur would be degraded should she negotiate with a prince whom she accused of rebellion as with an equal. After Sohr, his supplies and army were exhausted to the degree that he marched his army back towards Silesia by early October. Frederick traveled towards Berlin while the rest of his army under the Old Dessauer crossed the border on October 19th. Despite his optimism, the war chest was running empty, and Frederick actively pursued a new loan from either France or England, whoever was willing to help. On the Austrian side, things were moving as well. The Austrians planned to augment the Saxon army at Dresden before launching a winter campaign directed against Brandenburg and perhaps Berlin. First, they planned to surprise attack the Old Dessauer, winter-quartered in Halle. Then, they would push his army back all the way to Magdeburg. Diverting from waging war in Silesia, an attack against the relatively unprotected Brandenburg and its capital could be a fatal danger for Frederick. If this assault materialized, it would circumvent Frederick's army stationed in Silesia entirely. It would be a disaster. But the Prussian king was very well informed. Upon his arrival in Potsdam, Frederick's sources among the Saxon court informed him the next Austrian attack was to launch from Saxony, directed against Brandenburg. Then news reached him from the Russian court, where the Tsarina publicly announced she would support Saxony if they faced an attack. So he rightly grew more worried. Uncharacteristic as it was for the Austrians, they once again moved.
Is he worried because, I mean, look, he was kind of a dirtbag who you couldn't trust. So, is that the reason why he can't? It's not the reason why he can't. It doesn't make any sense. Are all these people just tired of him? And that's why they're going after him? Or are they going after him because they view him still as I don't want to say a major power, but he's a strong guy. So I'm just curious.
Fast with their plans. General Nadashdy with 14,000 light infantry reached Friedland, where he set up camp. Prince Charles was moving on to Reichenberg. Frederick's scouts reported that the Austrian army had already crossed the Saxon frontier in early November.
Wow.
In response, Frederick dispatched his trusted hussar commander von Zieten to hinder the Austrians from linking up with the Saxons at Dresden. Frederick himself, he departed from Potsdam and he ordered the Old Dessauer to redeploy his quartered army. Von Zieten's hussars were the first to engage in serious combat during the winter campaign. On November 23rd, one Saxon infantry regiment and 3 cavalry regiments defended Katholisch Hennersdorf. Noticing the enemy, Zieten's hussars charged again. After brief but savage fighting, the Saxons retreated, losing over 900 soldiers. Only 9 miles away was Prince Charles's army. Its lack of supplies, poor morale, and contradictory orders by generals wasn't a good foreboding. Instead of coming to the Saxons' aid, Charles learned the Prussians outnumbered his 18,000-strong army nearly 3-1.
Charles of Lorraine has not had a good go. Episode 3 and 4, you'll see. He just has not had a good shot. So I understand his reluctance to even fight the Prussians. I get it.
Ordered the retreat back into Bohemia. It appeared the Austrian offensive was averted before it had ever begun. Charles lost over 5,000 soldiers, whereas Prussia lost no more than 100. Frederick wrote, "I have done everything that a general can do with the least spilling of blood and with the greatest results." He wasn't wrong, and this did not go unnoticed among the Saxons and Austrians either. Soon after the battle, they received the British envoy carrying Frederick's instructions to offer them a moderate peace. Despite the initial refusal, the Saxon ministers did open negotiations, and the prospects seemed rather promising. Still, Frederick bombarded his mentor, the Old Dessauer, with letters ordering him to fall on the Saxons. So as the negotiations were ongoing, Dessauer scored victory after victory, crushing the poorly garrisoned Leipzig and forcing the Saxon field marshal, Frederick Augustus, Count Rutowski, to fall back nearby Dresden. It has to be said that the Dessauer completed these tasks with an unhealthy dose of aversion. Surviving correspondence between Frederick and him reveal he did not shy away from giving his opinion on the forced marches and battles during midwinter. His men were tired, and he refused to carry out Frederick's orders several times. Some correspondence implies that if things had gone differently, Dessauer would be a suitable candidate for court-martialing. But unbeknownst to both commanders, in the background peace negotiations were ongoing and looked more optimistic by the day. Still, following the king's orders, Dessauer advanced onto Dresden. Finally, on December 15, both armies met near Kesselsdorf, slightly south of the capital. It was a cold and misty afternoon with light snow. The old Dessauer and his army marched onto Dresden from the west, when scouts informed him of Field Marshal Rutowski and the Saxon main army holding the ground from Kesselsdorf to Ockerwitz. The old Prussian commander, 69 years old at this point, commanded a 32,000-strong Prussian army. Field Marshal Rutowski commanded a 35,000-strong Saxon army. Rutowski's Saxons were positioned along the Schönerbach River. The Austrian contingent under General Grüne was positioned on the outskirts of Ockerwitz towards the Elbe River. Rutowski ordered his infantry in Kesselsdorf to fortify the town with solid defenses and artillery. In the early afternoon, the old Dessauer's army approached Kesselsdorf. His army spanned from the southwest all the way to the north, opposite of the Saxon right flank. As the entire army approached, Dessauer ordered his infantry in the south to launch a frontal charge against the heavily fortified Kesselsdorf. Among the vanguard, charging towards the city, were his and Holt Grenadiers. Thanks to the strategic positioning of the artillery and the general fortifications, the infantry charge against Kesselsdorf experienced fierce resistance. The Prussian soldiers marched on despite continuous artillery shots fired against them. They suffered enormous casualties. As the infantry continued their charge, the Prussian infantry to their north and the cavalry on their left flank began their assault as well. However, the banks of the Schönerbach River were muddy and the terrain was difficult to cross in general. Consequently, Saxon artillery fired against the Prussian infantry and cavalry crossing the stream. Certain locations saw skirmishes erupt, but large-scale battles did not ensue, for both parties were too hindered by the terrain. Meanwhile, to the south of Kesselsdorf, the 1st Infantry Wave eventually had to retreat despite their discipline. The charge simply was not sustainable. They suffered hefty losses. Things were not looking good for the Prussians, and the Saxons also knew it. With sky-high morale and confident they would deal the Prussians a decisive blow, the Saxon defenders of Kesselsdorf leapt over their defensive positions to give chase against the Prussians. It is uncertain if this was a direct order, or if it was a spur-of-the-moment decision by the Saxon infantry. What is for sure is that once they left their defensive positions, the Saxons were exposed to whatever Prussian soldiers remained outside Kesselsdorf. Consequently, a 2nd Grenadier Regiment launched a counterattack. The Prussians clashed heavily with the Saxons. Brief, heavy combat broke out, but the Prussian iron discipline proved superior. Understanding their mistake by leaving their fortified positions, the Saxon lines quickly deteriorated into an uncoordinated rout. The Saxon left flank suffered the brunt of the damage, leading to them being pushed north towards the center lines. Despite only minor skirmishes happening throughout the entire center line, the Prussians had a minor advantage there too. When the Saxon defenders in the center line learned of their retreating comrades to the south, the center line began showing cracks as well. Because of the lack of aid from the Austrian General Grüne, we can safely assume the lines of communication between the Saxons and the Austrians were subpar. Shortly before dark, the entire center...
They see one unit running and they all start running. I don't fault Rutowski unless he ordered it. But his men, man, they got greedy. And they jumped that wall, or that, whatever. Wow.
The line deteriorated into a rout. Rutowski had lost central command for a while already, and could do nothing but leave his position. As for the Austrians, their only contribution was joining the Saxons in flight once they noticed their positions breaking. The Saxons and Austrians fled all the way to Prince Charles's army. Dessauer decided not to pursue them, but instead sent word to the king of his victory. In total, the Prussians lost 3,500 men, of whom 1,000 died. The Saxons suffered 3,000 fatalities. 5,000 more were captured. Relatively speaking, it was quite an expensive victory for the already thinned-out Prussian army, but international developments would soon mitigate these losses and turn the modest victory into a great one. This was an incredible victory for Prussia despite the casualties. Still, in a letter, Frederick made the sober remark that it was better to suffer the dead at Dresden than at Berlin. Fate had it that the victory was unnecessary.
Better to fight them there than here. If you're an American, you've heard that slogan. Yep, I get it.
As Dessauer and Rutowski were fighting the battle, unbeknownst to them, Frederick received word from the British envoy. King Augustus, doubling as Saxony's elector, agreed to the proposed peace terms. The Austrian envoy too supposedly agreed to these terms. If anything, the victory at Dresden strengthened Prussia's position. Frederick obviously was delighted, and when both armies linked up near Dresden 2 days later, Frederick dismounted and embraced his old mentor. The bad blood had been forgotten. The following day, after the surrender of the small Saxon garrison defending Dresden, the Prussians victoriously rode into the Saxon capital. Maria Theresa could do nothing but concede a military solution wasn't viable. On Christmas Day in 1745, both parties signed the Peace of Dresden. It ended the Second Silesian War. Maria Theresa confirmed the contents of the Treaty of Breslau, acknowledging Prussia's sovereignty over Silesia and the Duchy of Graz. In return, Frederick guaranteed the Habsburg lands and agreed to vote for Francis, Maria Theresa's husband, as Holy Roman Emperor. Saxony had to pay Prussia 1 million thalers as war indemnity. And for those who wonder, Frederick's dog, stolen at the Battle of Soor, was returned to him preceding the final battle.
I wondered what happened to that. Wow, his dog was even given back in the agreement. That's crazy.
In his History of My Own Times, Frederick himself wrote that the war had cost him 8 million thalers. By the time he signed the peace, he was left with just 15,000 in his treasury. Despite this, upon his return to Berlin, he was given a hero's welcome and hailed as Frederick the Great for the first time. The young king likely played a vital role in the propaganda campaign resulting in this flattering sobriquet.
Oh yeah, of course he
The
did.
War of the Austrian Succession ended up lasting 3 more years. Frederick's ally France was largely left to fight it out on its own. As it became more or less customary, the French did not find out about Frederick's peace until after he actually signed it. Just like before in November 1741 and the Treaty of Breslau in 1742, they were livid. For now, they were stuck in a war of which the outcome was still uncertain. But whether they would emerge victoriously or not, they wouldn't forget Frederick's betrayals.
Look, I don't know much about Frederick, but I could tell you the goddamn guy, you can't trust him. I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I've been drinking a lot. Obviously, water.
How can you go from a Christian making 6 figures?
How did you not shut your face when I paused the button? I don't understand that. I'm going to run to the bathroom, come back, and finish this video. Because I still have some beer to drink. And I want you to be happy. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So, video's over. Have a good day, have a good night.